Hello there, I'm Mystic. Welcome to my new podcast where I have a new conversation with a guest every single day. And they all have some pretty passionate things to say about the state of the world. So join us today, subscribe, like, and share wherever you listen to us, and tell us your opinions. We may have you on the show. Oh, and remember, always have fun. Hi, Jay. Thank you so much for participating in this podcast. I really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. And thank you to all of our listeners. I'm so grateful that you're here. I hope that wherever you are in this world, that you're safe and that you're healthy, and so is your family. And we're sending prayers to you. I had the opportunity of meeting Jay a number of years back in Washington, D.C., when I had a meeting with the CEO for PBS. And Jay and I had a great conversation. And I'd love for him to share a little bit about what he's doing now, where he finds himself, and see how we're doing in this great nation.
Great.
So where are you at right now, Jay?
I am in the suburbs of Washington, D.C.
So you're still out in Washington, and you're in the suburbs of Washington. And how
Maryland.
is it out there in the middle of this pandemic? How is it?
Well, um, things are starting to get more interesting as we've been in a shelter in place now for probably maybe about a week and a half now. Most people who have the ability to telework, they're working from home. And essential workers, those are people who work in what they consider essential businesses. They're allowed to come and go to and from work. But basically, we've been ordered to stay at home and not come out unless it's for an essential activity, which would be
So pretty much
doctor.
like the rest of this country. But what about the hospitals? Do you see any changes in the hospitals when you do go out?
Well, I'm not going anywhere near any hospital. I'm not trying. I'm not trying to be anywhere near a hospital right now. That's where there's trouble.
So you haven't had the opportunity to take a look and see if there's people standing in lines, if they're following the safe distancing. Um, you
Well,
haven't seen any of that.
I went to a hospital several weeks ago, and basically there was a line of cars outside. But it's interesting because in order to even get tested, you have to fall into a number of categories, and most people do not fall into those categories unless they're like sick already. So the lines outside are even for people who are just trying to go see, who are just trying to go to the emergency room. Period. They're treating everybody as if they're positive, which makes me feel like there's something there that that we don't know. Like they're treating everyone as if they have it already before you even get tested or anything.
So guilty before even having been proven not guilty or innocent. I mean, I
Right.
thought everyone was supposed to be innocent going in. That's a little bit strange. I haven't heard that one before. So you did go to a hospital about 2 weeks ago, but it wasn't during the pandemic, or it was on the brink of the
Well,
pandemic.
it wasn't doing the shelter in place, so people still had the ability to move to and fro. Um, but
And it
just
and it was like normal. It was normal when you went
no,
to the
it
hospital.
wasn't really normal. The hospital actually was not allowing anyone who didn't work at the hospital inside the hospital. You couldn't go visit anyone. You couldn't go, inside the hospital. It was only for workers and staff. So it wasn't normal. This was before the shelter in place. So I'm pretty
So
sure now.
patients and staff.
Yes, only patients and staff are allowed inside the hospital.
Interesting. And this is pretty much in Washington. I mean, because you live on the outskirts, I'm
Yeah,
assuming
yeah.
that. Washington is where the action is at.
yeah, it's considered DMV is the DC, Maryland, Virginia, Northern Virginia area. So this area is what they call the capital region. So
Hmm.
yes,
Hmm. And as I understand it from many of our conversations, you used to work for the United Nations, correct?
yes.
Doing what specifically? If you can share that with
Uh,
me in the audience.
proc- yes, procurement. I did procurement.
Can what is that? For the people who
Procurement is
don't know
the
what procurement is, can you share with
is
us
it
a
is
little bit?
yes, it is the purchase of goods and services um, for your organization. So basically, you write you do you have a there's a need that's established by someone, and you go out there and you fulfill that need, and you create a contract that then binds two different entities into a situation where they provide either a good or a service.
And working for the UN, were you allotted any, specific type of treatment? Can you share
Oh,
with
I
us
mean,
a little bit about?
well, I was I was overseas at some point, and yes, I was I was actually in a war area, or a post-war area, and we had to procure all sorts of things from construction materials to medicine to food to clothing. I mean, everything you can imagine, we had to procure.
Wow, now that's interesting. And so, um, how do you feel about what your job was? Like, how do you feel about the UN at large?
Well, on the surface, there's definitely it's a mission that needs to be done. Um, I look at it like global uh, social service. For those countries that can't um, fend for themselves or don't have the resources, the UN is there to aid and assist in making sure that the citizens are taken care of.
And that's on a surface level.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, when you dig deeper, there's politics involved and everything. So there's a lot of I'm sure you're aware, the United States, currently the current administration doesn't believe in the United Nations, and they've always threatened to cut funding or do their own thing. I mean, it's always a fight, um, politically, but I think the things that actually they do on the ground does make a difference.
Right. So it's about helping other people, helping other countries,
Absolutely.
helping individuals to get by
Right.
with food and
Right.
clothing and medical supplies all around the world. But now it
Yeah.
seems like we need that. And
Well, what we need is leadership. We don't have leadership. So, one thing that the UN works on is that it's clearly established who is in charge when you go into an area, and you're working in conjunction with the government or with other, um, with other non-governmental agencies. Everybody's working towards a common goal. Um, yeah, and right now we don't have that. We have quite the opposite.
well, this isn't a political show in that, like, I'm not going to really, everyone has an opinion, and I don't think that this is a platform specifically for that, because I'm not into politics, and I have my own personal belief, and I'm not going to share that because I don't think it's really relevant. What's relevant right now is that everyone on the globe is healthy and safe, and that the elderly are not going to get kicked out to the side, and they're not going to give up their lives um, for other people. I think that's crazy. I mean, they helped to build this country, and they made all their money They worked really hard. Some people have money, some people don't. And to think that they're also going to give their lives for us, I think is ridiculous. I think that's
Well,
enough is enough.
I can I can I can counter that with I don't know about the elderly, but this current pandemic is affecting African Americans more than anybody else at rates higher than anyone else. So I wouldn't necessarily focus on the elderly. I think
Well, that's what we're being told
it's
by
been
the
affecting
news, but we
everyone.
don't know if that's true.
Well, then we could say the same about the elderly, then, right? I mean, that's what we're being told about them too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, coming from media, I mean, this is what I do, the media, not news, definitely not news, but I understand it in a completely different way. And I've seen things and heard things that just completely shocked me. And so that's why I'm doing this because everybody has an opinion and I want to know how everyone's doing all around the world. And I want to know if what we're being spoon fed is indeed the truth. And it sounds like from what I'm hearing is that the epicenter of this whole pandemic, um, how it's being controlled rather, is really in Washington. And so it seems like from what I can hear in your voice is that it's pretty calm. It's abnormal to stay in our homes. It's abnormal to have
Well,
this implemented, but at the
I
same
have
time,
I have I have friends in the New York area. I would disagree that it's the DC area. I think it's currently is the New York, New Jersey area
I was
that
talking
actually,
about DC.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, even in DC, it's actually not it's not as bad. I mean, there are some cases, but it's definitely not per capita is not as some other places. It's pretty much life as usual. There are some people are taking precautions, but it's not to the extent of what we're seeing in other areas. But
So you don't
about
feel that this pandemic is warranted?
2000, uh, the UN puts out a annual report every year of the biggest things that are facing the planet. And back in 2000, the number one thing that was facing the planet was overpopulation. So I think that that's something just to keep in mind as we move forward. I think the world is overpopulated, and it's not far.
That's what we're being told, right? That's what we're being told.
Well, that was one of the things that came out back in 2000. This is before any of these um, different and diseases came out, whether it's SARS or MERS or avian flu or West. I mean, before any of these different things, back in 2000, overpopulation was the thing that they said was the number one issue facing mankind.
Who's the they that you're referring to?
The UN,
Who's they?
the United Nations.
Oh, the UN. Okay. So
Yeah.
so what they were facing back in 2000 was the fact, according to the UN, that we had overpopulation. And at that time, do you remember what the population of the globe was? Do you
I
remember
don't.
if they had,
Yeah, I don't recall what it was.
huh? Okay.
But we've been exponentially increasing. We're going. Basically, they were saying that the planet couldn't sustain the amount of people that were on it for too much longer.
Well, yeah, that's the pop, right. So are you thinking that the population is being weeded out right now?
Well, it's not far fetched to think that.
Well, what are your reasons?
History. Um, the we have a government that is always willing to experiment with people without telling the people. So it's happened before where they use people as experiments, and it's just not far fetched to think that that could be the case again.
Well, the interesting thing, and I hear you, right? Absolutely, because in a previous show I had done, we were talking a little bit about 5G and how 5G,
Right.
the radiation that it emits, and how it's being used, and how like different populations are being targeted and impoverished and whatnot. I mean, the list goes on and on. But again, these are conspiracy theories, or quote unquote, that's what they're called. I personally believe that the word conspiracy was used as a weapon against the people that were shouting out the truth. Now, not all conspiracy theories are accurate, most of them are not, but there are some people, and that this was going to happen for a long time, like almost 30 years, right?
Yeah, well, I think conspiracy theories have some truth in them, which is why they're so, uh, they, which is why they could entice you to believe that they're true. They have some shreds of truth, to them. So
Hello? Hello? Jay, are you there? It looks like we just got cut off. Jay, are you there? Jay, I will be back.
well,
Hi, Jay. Is that
yes,
you? Oh my gosh.
yes,
Okay, great, great.
no.
So it looks like you got bumped off for a little bit, but we're back on. And I know that you were talking about something really important, and it was called population control.
Right.
Please take it away.
So when you look at the fact that the world body, which is the United Nations, stated that the number one problem facing the world was population control or overpopulation, should I say? And
And
that
that
was
was in the year 2000,
in
correct?
the year 2000. That they basically were stating that the world could not sustain the amount of people that were living in it, and that had to do with the food supply. So when you put together, and that's very relevant to today. For example, when we know the fact about GMO, right? Where GMO is, we're not eating food that's natural. A lot of the food that we eat is, genetically engineered, and the nutrients are not there, and we're actually living off of food that is, manufactured in labs and has a lot of chemicals. And so when you look at, I mentioned a few minutes ago about how this disease right now is affecting African Americans at a higher rate. You have to look at it from the point of view of nutrition, because a lot of the, you know, people in urban areas do not have the ability to have good nutrition. So it makes sense that they would be impacted more by, if there's this virus that's going around that is affecting, people's bodies. It seems like people who are healthy and practice good nutrition seem to have a better chance of beating it than those who don't. These are all the things that you could take into account, and to see that what could be possible as far as what the government could be doing to depopulate.
All over the world.
Uh,
But
yeah,
interestingly, that enough that you should say that and bring that up, and I'm so grateful that you have, because I did see that African Americans at 19% just last night were the highest of all, and the least were the Asian people, which is very interesting, considering that it did come from Wuhan, as
I just
we're being told. And I don't
right.
know, we could be wrong. I could be completely wrong, um, but
Well, if you
Africa
mhm.
is doesn't have, most of the people
so
in
the
Africa are fine.
yeah, the cases that were actually reported in Africa, it was brought over by people who returned to Africa from Europe.
Right.
um, and that's because of, there's different reasons why they say that that's the case, but it could actually be also the fact that the nutritional value, they eat real food there,
Correct.
as much as there could be shortages of food, which is another issue that's not really it's not really the case. They do a lot of farming, they do a lot of natural farming. So, but um, going back to the issue of the virus itself, even there's 8 different strains of this particular virus that's going around, and there's one particular strain that came from Wuhan. The United States actually has about 5 or 6 different of the 8 different strains, and this thing has been around for a while longer than we have been told. Uh, and when this first broke out in Washington State, they actually stated that the strain that was in Washington State actually had been in our population for some time, and it had nothing to
Correct.
do with the one in Wuhan. So
Well, so here's what I've heard. Again, this is all, you know, I'm trying the very best to bring up to date real news and not fake. And if somebody out there knows that this is incorrect, then please correct me. I'm okay with that. But what I heard is that it originated in Washington, the state of Washington, and there was a lab there, and it was, and supposedly, I don't know if this is true, but supposedly, Bill Gates is one of the owners of that lab, and then that was taken to Wuhan. That's what I
yeah,
heard. I could be
right.
completely wrong,
So
and
that's right. So that's one of the strains. That's one of the strains. However, there's another story that says that it was actually came from a biowarfare lab here in Maryland, in Fort Detrick, Maryland, and that was taken to Wuhan during the military World Games
I
in
never heard
October.
that. I never heard that one. Interesting.
Yeah. So the story is basically, if you could look this up, actually, this is fact. You can actually research this. In August of last year, in Fort Detrick, Maryland, there's a is a an army lab where they conduct biowarfare testing. They actually had their license revoked by the CDC because of the fact that they weren't being cautious with how they dealt with their waste from
Oh,
their experiments. So the lab was shut down, and this was in August of 2019. So apparently, in October of 2019 in Wuhan, they actually held something called the World Military Games, and soldiers from Fort Detrick attended those games. And although they did not place in any event, which um, to think of it, Americans usually would, you would think that Americans would place at some sort of level if they go to a military games, event. But anyways, these soldiers didn't place in any event. They just attended the the um, the games, and from the story, it goes that that's where possibly this was released in Wuhan to make it seem like it came from Wuhan. So
I see. Well, I see this. This is really interesting. I did find an article, and it's at Fort Detrick in Maryland
yes.
at the United States military's main biolab.
Hmm.
And it says deadly germ researchers shut down at Army lab over safety concerns. And that was August 8th, 2019. And it was a screenshot from the New York Times. They first came out with that article. And then I'm seeing this article right now from LouRockwell.com.
Hmm.
And the article was written on March 14th, 2020. So thank you, because I had not heard that one before. And that's very interesting. There's so many turns and twists and twists and turns, and you just don't
Right.
know what's true anymore. And it's a little bit nerve wracking. And I think that the unknown is what has us
Well, and
really freaked out.
to also say that you can't. This has to turn political because, in the fact, we also have a president who is it's just to me is the timing was very odd that we were in the middle of a tariff war with China, and all of a sudden this happens. Um, that's one thing. The other thing I look at is the fact that the president has been out there pushing for a certain medic. So one of the things I used to purchase, actually, let me tell you, I used to purchase medications for the United States government. I actually purchased HIV medication, malaria medication, and all sorts of other essential medicines for the government to be sent out to developing nations. So I'm very familiar with different types of medications when it comes to malaria and HIV. These are the sort of diseases. So while Trump is out here, um, you know, saying that there's been some promise showed by an anti-malarial drug that is not the case. It was just reported by the New York Times that he actually has a financial interest in a company that produces that same medicine. So, there's just so many different moving parts to the situation that we have a veil over our eyes right now. It's
Yeah, and we're hoping that um you know, it'll all be revealed to us. Are we going to like it? Probably not. But then we're going to have to figure out, we're going to have to sit back and we're going to have to figure out what are we going to do with the information that we were just given. And hopefully we're crossing our fingers that it's the truth, because when somebody lies to you over and over, and then all of a sudden they tell you the truth, the truth is even hard to believe. It's even harder to believe many times because that person or that entity has lied over and over and over. It's almost like a sociopathic thing that's happening here. And we kept turning our cheek. We kept looking away. We didn't want to face the truth. And now look where we're at. Our men
absolutely.
our men in this country are on lockdown, and I
Well,
don't know how much
well,
longer
if
that's going to
if
happen.
you have to look at it from this point of view too. I mean, so this is the other side of this where, I think studies show that people who, even older people who have social connections live longer.
Mm-hmm.
We are social beings. We thrive in social, situations. So they're teaching us how to be. They're sort of dehumanizing us right now. They're telling us don't be social, don't talk to your neighbor, don't hug your neighbor, don't, keep. They're trying to move us away from the close interpersonal nature that we have, naturally, to have us, to take that away from us. And I'm wondering how long is that going to last? How long are people going to actually
Right.
take that before
That's
people
what I
can
keep, right. That's what I keep saying. Well, and then I don't know if you heard this also, that this is going to happen to us two more times aside from this one.
Well, it's going to keep happening, right?
Yeah.
It's
It's going
yes.
to happen two more
I
times,
Actually, I
basically.
saw an article yesterday that said that this is the first inning of a nine-inning game. That we should be prepared for this to be
The
ongoing.
first one, wow.
Yes,
Wow.
that was what someone at the CDC said, in an article that I read yesterday. That this
Well,
is the first inning of a nine-inning game.
so ongoing in regards to the virus, or ongoing to a new way of life? We're returning more into
Both.
digital human being. Okay, both.
Well, yeah, both, because the virus is not going to go away. So, basically, if you think about, let's say, for example, like the eradication of polio or, measles or something like that, right? Basically, you have to get, so this leads us to another conversation now, which is vaccinations. Um, you know, so as I told you, I've worked with a lot of pharmaceutical. I've actually worked for the biggest pharmaceutical company. Well, it's not a pharmaceutical company. It's actually a pharmaceutical standard setting operation. It's called the United States Pharmacopoeia. And these pharmacies, a lot of pharmaceutical operations have actually are indemnified from being sued, and they they are looking for new, since we're looking for new ways to get cheaper medicine, right? We're trying to get programs and social corporate responsibility. They have a way to actually, they're not making a lot of money per se in their eyes, right? They want to find new ways to make money, and one of those ways is vaccinations. So basically, um, the what we're moving towards now is for a new vaccination for everyone worldwide. Everyone will have to be vaccinated to against this coronavirus, right? So new generations, people having kids now is going to be something that you get as a child, and you have to get a vaccination against, and it's just another revenue stream for these companies. They're looking for more money.
And some people are a little bit nervous and scared, because if you read the what Obama signed, and I actually put it up on my Facebook, what he signed into law, which started with Bush, and it has to do with the Patriot Act, that legally, they can come into our home. The government can come into our home, extract whoever they want to. They can vaccinate and put chips in us and keep track of us. I mean, it's all there. You could take a look at that paperwork. It's kind of
Yeah, so
kind of
I
a little
I I don't yeah I so the Patriot Act was the beginning of all this to that set up the stage for everything else to
right.
happen, you know. So
And we have to
um
stop fighting because they have us, they have everyone fighting against each other. Oh, Democrat, Republican, blah, blah, blah. I really don't care about any of that. And I've said this before, but what I care about is the health and safety of every single human being on this planet. Anything
yeah,
outside of that is
yeah,
inappropriate.
Democrat or Republican doesn't really
Yeah.
make a difference. What
Yeah. I
makes
don't
a
care
difference
about
now
that.
is who are the extremely rich people that have that they have uh and it's an old argument that the top 1% of the population control 99% of the resources. I mean, we've heard that story before. It's even more and more apparent now in the
Yeah,
fact
but
that
I think, it's funny because I was thinking about this the other day and I was thinking like, okay, so maybe the conspiracy theories were given to the people who would not go along with the whole system, and they were given something to the people that were thinkers or are thinkers and want to think outside of the box. But at the same time, I think it's almost like a form of manipulation as well. Like I think that's even also a form of manipulation.
yeah,
And
before we got cut off earlier, I was actually saying that conspiracy theories are so enticing because they have truth to them. They may not always be entirely true. They may not have all the pieces of the puzzle, but they have something there. And when you have just enough, then you could cloud the rest of it by adding on a bunch of BS, and people can get lost in what's really at stake. So,
right, serves to confuse, you
right,
know,
exactly.
right. And it's interesting. I want to go back to that if we can, because in the year 2000, okay, Jay, you said you were working for the UN, and that the
Yeah,
big topic in the year 2000, that was 20 years ago, was overpopulation.
yes.
And there were 6 million people, or 6 billion rather, excuse me, on the globe, a little over 6 billion. That was the
Hmm.
estimate. And now there's the estimate of 7.5 billion people on the globe.
Right.
So you feel that perhaps this is, some type of lessening the population with this
Yes. I mean,
vaccine
I
or
feel
with
that.
this virus or
Well, I mean, I think that they're just they you know they've tried to. I think they've had several attempts at different things before with some of the other. Um, no, they didn't make it to be pandemics, but some of the other things that hit the globe, like I said, as the SARS or the MARS or the one of the all the different types of flu, the avian flu, the West Nile virus, all these different things to me were sort of possibly attempts to deal with the situation, but not enough people were affected, and they needed to do something quickly because as you can, as I think everybody has noticed, um, the world is changing. We don't know why, but the weather patterns are different. Like I said, with the food situation, we're eating food that's not real. Uh, you know, we don't we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and possibly it may be that they know something that we don't know, and something had to be done. I don't know, but it definitely feels like something is happening here.
well, okay, so here's something really, really out there. So, I, because, I don't even know how Hollywood is going to survive through all this, but, I did have the privilege of working, and creating film and television and whatnot. Um, and there is some truth to in the films. The films have had the most truth of anything I've seen out there thus far.
Social conditioning, yeah, social conditioning, of course.
Right, right. So Jupiter ascending, I was watching that from the possibility of it, what happened and with the UN in the year 2000. The Matrix came out in 1999. So it doesn't surprise me that
Right.
that's what they were talking about. But in Jupiter ascending, they actually talk about population control and how these quote unquote different entities from other worlds had gone down to these different planets where there were people, and how the
Mhm.
Earth was coveted because the energy that was
So let me
that,
tell you,
that
that's
the
not.
energy that each person emits is highly, highly valuable. And this is what these entities
Listen,
feed on. So I just wanted to throw that out there. So if
that
anyone's watching
well,
or listening or can rent Jupiter Ascending, they most certainly should. You were saying?
let me tell you that is not that far fetched. I read a book in 1995, um, when I was actually in college, by a gentleman by the name of William Cooper, and Mr. William Cooper was a naval intelligence officer who said that he experienced many different things that he put in this book. The book is called "Behold the Pale Horse,"
Yeah.
and he actually wrote in the book that in the beginning of the book he wrote that he will be killed at some point, that he will be killed for writing what he's writing. And sure enough, about 5 years after he wrote the book, he was indeed killed by IRS agents serving a warrant, which I'm still baffled by the idea that IRS agents are serving warrants with guns. So, but I'll digress from that point. But in his book, he actually wrote about the fact that we will have an event that happens, and that they will consolidate power, they will consolidate political power, financial power by an event that will try to bring the world together. And we thought that was 9/11, but apparently that's too far gone and people have forgotten. So maybe this is the second part of that. But he also spelled out the fact that we do have actually pacts with other world beings, and that they are allowed to come here and do experiments, and so you have to read the book. There's a lot to digest in the book, and he talks about the fact that actually that they will prepare you through Hollywood
Hmm.
for what's to
Yeah, I'm
come.
very familiar.
That
I'm
they'll
very
show you
familiar with
the
with with Mr. Cooper's work. And not only did they use him and mind control and blah 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 and Pizzagate, and I mean the list goes on and on. Um, but I really feel that this HIV, from what he said too, HIV and AIDS was a man-made created disease.
yes, yes, it was
And it
created in
was, yeah, it
France.
was specifically to target blacks, Hispanics, and homosexuals, to eradicate the earth from blacks,
all the
Hispanics.
groups, all the groups that the white Anglo-Saxon man hates. So absolutely,
So I just wanted to share that because it's a little bit disturbing that we now know
yes,
100% that HIV is a man-made created disease. And just for people, revelation is a revealing. The word revelation is a revealing of something that was in the dark. And
right.
so if we go based on the good book, it will definitely delineate. If you have read any of Revelation, it will delineate exactly what's going to happen. And this seems like it's happening. It seems like it's happening. That's why these zombie
Absolutely.
movies, apocalyptic movies, all that. I mean, yeah, it's Mein Kampf all over again. Mein Kampf was used all over to control people.
Yeah, so we get ready for more to come. There's definitely more to come.
Well, thank you, Jay, so much for your time. I
Xavier.
really appreciate the time that you took to have this conversation with me and with us and with everyone all around the world. We're happy that you and your family are safe and that you're healthy. And I'm wishing that for every single person listening to this podcast. I'm so grateful for you. And remember, as I always finish every single podcast, united we stand. Thank you so much for listening. Stay safe, subscribe, and review. We will come at you with many more topics, and remember, united we stand.